Imagine finding an ancient artifact buried in the dirt. You'd almost certainly be taken aback by it, unless, by any chance, you're an archaeologist, in which case you're probably used to that sort of thing. But even for archaeologists, there are some discoveries that make them stop in their tracks and say, "Wow!" We've got plenty of discoveries like that for you in this video, so let's get started. We know that our ancient ancestors lived alongside woolly mammoths, and we also know that the bravest of our ancestors also hunted them for food, but we have no idea what process, hunt, or ritual created this incredible Ice Age relic in Russia. It's a 40-foot wide circle of mammoth bones, including skeletons, tusks, and full skulls, and all of them were brought to this location deliberately to be arranged in this way. It's a monument of some kind, but we can only guess at its purpose. The site, known as Kostenki Borshevo, was created approximately 25,000 years ago, but was only discovered for the first time in 2014. The remains of at least 60 mammoths are present at the site, but experts are at a loss to explain what they're doing there. Their best guess so far is that the carcasses of captured mammoths were placed here in the permafrost to preserve the meat, like a gigantic freezer unit. That's plausible, but it doesn't explain why the hunter-gatherers would have taken such care as to lay them down in the formation of a 2-foot-high ring. In 2019, the French village of Plougastel-du-Lot in Brittany offered a cash reward to anyone who could translate a strange inscription on a local stone. We're in 2023 now, and that reward is still available. Nobody's been able to do it. The inscription has been troubling local historians and language experts for centuries, but nobody's ever come close to being able to translate it. That's surprising when you consider that the inscription is short and comes with illustrations, including a boat. The years 1786 and 1787 are etched onto the stone too. Some of the experts who've inspected it firsthand believe the language to be derived from Old Breton, whereas others say it's Basque. More recently, there have even been suggestions that it's an old form of Welsh. The years correspond to the construction of artillery batteries and forts in the surrounding area, but that wouldn't explain the presence of the boat symbol. Another theory is that it's an inscription that commemorates a disaster at sea, but that it was carved by a survivor who was only semi-literate. If that's the case, the inscription might remain untranslated forever. Next, we have a very controversial archaeological discovery. It's called the Los Lunas Decalog Stone, which was allegedly found in Mexico in 1933. The controversy around the artifact stems from the fact that it's covered in inscriptions which, to some people, look like they're written in the most ancient form of the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. Some scholars even claim to have translated the inscription and say that it tells the tale of a man called Zakiniros. He was a Greek Cypriot, and he apparently became lost in the Mexican desert after arriving from overseas many centuries before Columbus, and even before the Vikings arrived in Newfoundland. The Harvard-educated historian Robert Pfeiffer disagrees, though. He feels the inscription is more likely to be a version of the biblical Ten Commandments. The Decalog Stone was claimed as a discovery by a man named Frank Hibben, but he says he was gifted it by a tour guide who told him he'd found it while walking alone in the desert decades earlier. The lack of clarity about the artifact's history means it could be a hoax, and many historians would prefer to think of it that way. Now we have a very rare Near Eastern Bronze Age tool, a cast bronze shovel and trenching hoe. These types of tools were essential for large construction projects, like the foundations and underground chambers of royal tombs and temples. Since bronze was so valuable during that time, around 4,000 years ago, it's likely that only royal construction teams would have had access to professionally made tools such as this one. It was made using the open sand cast method. A model was first made and then pressed into a damp sand bed to create a perfect cavity for molten bronze to be poured into. The finished tool was then removed, identical to the cast but rough and raw on top from the cooling bronze. The digging tool is in superb condition, with linear raised decorations on the underside and evidence of ancient use wear on the chopping end. It is a one-of-a-kind tool of its size, and according to one of the world's top experts on ancient Near Eastern Bronze Age weapons and tools, it has no analog in any museum in the world. The city of Tulsa in Oklahoma is not the center of the universe. Everybody knows that. However, there is a concrete circle in the middle of downtown Tulsa that the locals like to refer to as the center of the universe. This isn't your average stone circle or art installation. If you stand right at the center of the circle and make a noise, the sound of whatever noise you make echoes back to you far louder than it was when you made it. It's like standing in an echo chamber, but the chamber has no walls. The circle is open to the air, and so the echo effect ought to be impossible. What's even stranger is that while noise ripples back to the person in the middle of the circle, it's almost inaudible to anybody outside the circle. It's said that you could let off a foghorn in the middle of the center of the universe and nobody walking past would be able to hear it. The effect is known to scientists as an acoustic vortex and is thought to be caused by sound reflecting off a circular wall nearby. However, the wall is well outside the circle. There's no proof that the wall is connected to the enigma, and so the strange goings-on in the middle of the circle remain unexplained. If we were to give this outstanding natural formation outside Mauritania and Africa its official name, we'd have to call it the Richat structure, which sounds a little like something out of science fiction. We prefer to call it by its more commonly used moniker, the more poetic-sounding Eye of the Sahara. It's an appropriate name, too, because it's right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. It isn't easy to give you a sense of the scale of the Eye of the Sahara just from pictures and video footage. If you were standing on its rim, it would be impossible to see all of it at once. It's more than 30 miles wide across the center. It's so huge that it's even visible from space. The first few astronauts who took off from Earth would use it as a landmark to give them an idea of where they were in relation to home. Initially believed to be an ancient impact crater, it's now generally accepted that the Eye of the Sahara got its appearance from desert weather slowly eroding a geological dome. The Giants Causeway is the most celebrated natural feature in Northern Ireland. You'll find it on the coast of County Antrim. The thousands of hexagonal stone columns that rise out of the ground here look like stepping stones for giants, which is where the area got its name from. To find the real reason for the strange appearance of these stones, we have to go back more than 50 million years to the Paleogene era, a time of enormous volcanic activity in this part of the world. Molten basalt ran into chalk beds, forming a plateau made of lava. As the lava cooled, the plateau cracked and broke apart, making these shapes as it did so. The columns vary drastically in height, but the largest is almost 40 feet tall. The rich myths and legends of Northern Ireland say that the causeway was made by a giant called Fionn MacCumhall, who built the causeway as a bridge to Scotland so he could fight and defeat rival giant Benandonner. It's a fantastic, colorful legend. Lava formations like this are very rare, but there are other examples elsewhere in the world. The most famous is probably the Devil's Post Pile in California, USA. Situated in a secluded peatland region of Hoy Island in Orkney, Scotland, the Dwarfy Stain is an exceptional megalithic chambered tomb. It's the only one of its kind in Britain. The Dwarfy Stain's layout resembles that of other chambered tombs in Orkney, but it distinguishes itself as the only one that's hewn from a single block of Devonian Old Red sandstone, rather than multiple individual stones. The tomb's dimensions are 24 feet in length, 12 feet in width, and up to 7 feet in height. Unfortunately, it has been subjected to vandalism over time, although it has experienced less of it now that it's under the management of Historic Environment Scotland. The hole in its roof was put there by vandals in the 16th century. and the surfaces have been covered with 18th and 19th century graffiti. The tomb's entrance on the west side was once covered with a stone slab, which now lies on the ground outside the tomb. The slab door is a distinct feature in Northern Europe and is akin to Neolithic or Bronze Age tombs located throughout the Mediterranean. The Dwarfy Stain gets its name from a local legend that tells of a dwarf named Trollid living in it, which is a nice touch of local color. Here in the 2020s, we still don't have a totally accurate method of predicting earthquakes. It's a problem that the human race has been wrestling with for thousands of years, but the first known attempt to build an earthquake detector happened in China in the year 132. This is the Seism Graph designed by Zhang Heng, and it's incredibly sophisticated for a product of that era. Shang's device works by placing it on the ground, where it's sensitive enough to detect tremors from long distances. When tremors are detected, a pendulum within the seismograph swings. Should the swing become strong enough, it will dislodge a ball from the mouth of one of the ornate dragons on the side of the device, which then drops into the waiting mouth of one of the equally ornate frogs. This not only indicates the approach of the earthquake, but also gives the observer a rough idea of which direction the earthquake is happening in. We can't decide whether to be impressed that Zhang Heng was so far ahead of his time, or embarrassed that we haven't come up with a much better way of predicting earthquakes all these years later. It's entirely possible that the Feos Disc bears a message from our ancient ancestors that might tell us 100 things we don't know about them, and the era in which they lived. Unfortunately, we're having a hard job of translating it, and it's doubtful that we'll ever crack the code. The heavily decorated disc was found in the remains of a Minoan palace on the Greek island of Crete many years ago, and it's been puzzling scientists ever since. There are more than 200 different inscriptions on the disc, and not one of them corresponds with any form of written language ever discovered anywhere else on the planet. With no substantial evidence to go on, the meaning of the disc is wide open to interpretation. Some people think that it might be a calendar. Others suspect that it might contain a prayer written in the secret language of a long-forgotten religious cult. There are too many symbols for the text to represent an alphabet, and yet too few for it to constitute a script. The maze-like spiral design was probably significant to its designers also, but we can't fathom the purpose of that either. It's a total enigma. Way back in 1836, a Christian missionary called William Colenso visited a group of Maori women living close to Whangarei in New Zealand. While he was there, he noticed that they were using a strange-looking bronze bell as a pot to boil potatoes in. The artifact is now known as the Tamil Bell, and it's a controversial archaeological find. The 5-inch-long bell has an inscription that runs around its rim, and the language of the inscription has been positively identified as Old Tamil. Translated into English, it says, "This bell belongs to Sikaya Tanasva's ship." The characters that appear in the inscription are archaic and haven't been part of modern Tamil script for at least 500 years. The presence of an object of this age in New Zealand suggests that there might have been a Tamil presence in the area long before we believe there to have been contact between the cultures. But the bell alone can't be taken as confirmation of that theory. It could have found its way here through trade, or as part of a vessel that was lost at sea and eventually drifted across the water to New Zealand. Still, it's an object that seems curiously out of place in both space and time. One of the most remarkable treasure discoveries in British history happened in 1912, when a fabulous collection of 500 pieces of Stuart and Elizabethan-era jewelry were found buried below the cellar of a house in the Cheapside district of London. Now known as the Cheapside Horde, it's thought that the items had been underground since at least 1666, perhaps trapped there by construction work that happened in the aftermath of the Great Fire of London that year. The most remarkable individual piece in the whole collection is the Emerald Dial, a priceless watch set into one single emerald crystal. The watch is without parallel. No timepiece like this has ever been found before or since, not just in Britain, but anywhere in the world. It would have taken the skills of a master craftsperson to create this ornamental watch, and it wouldn't have been cheap. It's highly likely that it was created as a bespoke piece for an aristocrat, and perhaps even a member of the royal family. The original owner of the Cheapside Horde has never been identified, but they left behind an incredible collection for us to enjoy. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!